morning. I hope that everyone is well, that everyone and your families are healthy, and the Mirat Hashem should stay healthy. I also hope that everyone is finding a way during this time to be occupied, successful, productive, and happy. It is Tuesday morning, and I'm recording the shir for tomorrow morning. We're up to Chav Zayin Amud Beis, the beginning of the wide lines, or actually the last of the narrow lines. V'chachamim oimrim moichrin oisem mimkar oilam. Yesterday, the last thing we learned was a complex piece regarding the halacha. Reb Meir said that if someone sells a Beit Knesset, he has to sell it on the condition that when he has enough money, the buyer will sell it back. And the issue was, is that called a sale and a resale, or if in the end he actually does buy it back, then it emerges that the whole thing was just a loan, and it might have a ribbit, an interest issue. Now let's go forward. The Chachamim say, you're allowed to sell the Beit Knesset without any conditions or stipulations, except that the buyer cannot use it for one of the four things. He can't use it as a bathhouse, tannery, a mikveh, or a laundry. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Mutar la'adam lahashten mayim b'toich arba amos shel tefillah. A person is allowed to urinate within arba amot of where he previously prayed. If somebody prayed in the street, after he finished praying, he's allowed to urinate within arba amot. Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says, Maika mashmalan. What is Rav Yehuda letting us hear? Tanina, we learned in the Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Omer, Rav Yehuda says, Mochrin ota l'shum chatzer. Rav Yehuda's view was that you can sell a Beit Knesset, and the buyer can just use it as a courtyard, as an area of square footage. V'lokeach masha yirtze yaseh, and the lokeach can do anything he wants, even though this is a place where people prayed. Afilu Rabbanan, and even the Rabbanan, who prohibit using a Beit Knesset, selling a Beit Knesset, and afterwards to use it as a bathroom, as a place to urinate. That's lo ka'amri. They didn't say that Ela Beit Knesset the kaviyah kedushate. That's only because it was a Beit Knesset where its kedusha was permanent. Avla arba amot, but within 4 amot of a place where a guy prayed, the lo kaviyah kedushatayu, where this was not really a permanent place of prayer, there would be no prohibition. In other words, according to the Chachamim, once you finish praying, that's it. You can sell it. You can sell a Beit Knesset, and the buyer can do what he wants with it. So consequently, if somebody prayed in the street, there should be no prohibition. It doesn't belong to anyone. There should be no prohibition to urinate there. And even the Rabbanan only prohibited a Beit Knesset, which was a permanent place of Kedusha, not in the street. And therefore, seemingly, it is superfluous. What Shmuel said was no chiddush. Tani Tanaka Meder of Nachman, there was somebody who taught Bryce in front of Rav Nachman. Hamispalel marchik arba amos amashtin. Once again, he says whoever prays needs to move arba amot away from where he prayed in order to urinate. V'hamashtin marchik arba amos mispalel. And somebody who urinated needs to move away from where he urinated by 4 amot before he prays. Omer Leiser of Nachman told the person who taught this Bryce in front of him, Bishlama, it is well understood. Hamashtin, somebody who urinated and the urine is still there on the ground. Marchik arba amos mispalel. He must distance himself by 4 amot from the urine to pray. Because Tanina, there's a Mishnah in Brachos. Kama, how far? Yarchik mehem. Does one have to distance himself from urine, uminat soa, or waste? Arba amot. So biblically, you'd have to move away from waste, and even rabbinically, you have to move away from existing urine. Elo rather, amispalil, marchik arba amos umashtin. But if somebody prays, he must move arba amot away before he urinates. Lomali, why do you have to go away 4 amot from where you prayed? Ihachi, if so, kedashtinu lekulu shvila denarda. You've just sanctified every alleyway in Naharda. It seems that in those days, people didn't have bathrooms. People just found a private place and they urinated. But if so, in alleyways where people may have urinated when nobody was around, all of a sudden that alleyway becomes a place of Kedusha that you can't pray there anymore? How could that be? So the same way the Gemara said before, that when Shmuel said you're allowed to urinate with an Arba Amashal Tefillah, and the Gemara said, of course, why not? Here also, why would there be a Braita that if a person prayed, he has to move away 4 amot before he urinates? Amr Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi corrects the halacha. He says, Bishlam, I'm sorry, I skipped a word. Tanei, he told this person who taught Braitot, Yisha, doesn't mean you have to move away from the place where you urinated before you daven. It means you have to wait. After a person urinated, he should wait the amount of time it takes to go 4 amot before he starts to daven. So we're not talking about distance, we're talking about time. That a person who davened should wait the time of 4 amos before he urinates, and a person who urinates should wait the time of 4 amos before he prays. So now the Gemara says, Bishlam, it's well understood, Mashtin, somebody who urinated, Yishta should wait, Kedei Hiluch 4 amot, the amount of time it takes to go 4 amot, Mishum Nitzotzot, because there might be a droplet on him, and you want to wait till that droplet evaporates before he starts to pray. Ela mitpal, but if he prayed, Yishhe Kedei Hiluch 4 amot, he needs to wait the amount of time it takes to go 4 amot, Lomali. Why, if he prayed, does he have to wait before he urinates? Amar Rav Ashi, Sir Rav Ashi says, Kol 4 amot, because the amount of time it takes to go 4 amot, Tfilatos dura befiv. His prayer is still fluent in his mouth, V'rachushi merachshan sifavase. It could be his lips are still moving. I never quite understood that. A person's lips move when you're actually praying, but if you finish praying, why are his lips still moving? I don't know, maybe it just means that his mind is still on prayer, or because of that, maybe without intent his lips are moving, and therefore it's not respectful to urinate at that time, so you should wait. In any case, what have we learned so far? So Rav Yudah said in the name of Shmuel that if a person prayed, he's allowed to urinate within 4 amot of where he prayed. And the Gemara said that was obvious, because even in a Beit Knesset, which was a place of public prayer, the Chachamim said you can sell it and the buyer can do what he wants with the place. And even Rabbi Yehuda said you can sell it and the buyer can do what he wants with it. Even the Rabbanan who prohibited it, only prohibited because it was a Beit Knesset. But if somebody just urinated, prayed somewhere in the street, there should be no prohibition to urinate within the place that he prayed. Then there was a Braita. The Braita said you can't urinate where you prayed or pray where you urinated. So Gemara says, I understand you can't pray where you urinated because you have to distance yourself from it. But why can't you urinate where you prayed? I think more explained, it doesn't have to do with space, it has to do with time. You need to wait between urinating to pray and between praying to urinate. So Gemara said, I understand, you need to wait between urinating to pray to make sure that if there's a droplet, it should evaporate. Why do you need to wait between praying to urinate? The Gemara's answer was because when you're praying, even after you finished, if your mind was concentrating on prayer and your lips were moving, there might just be some nervous movement of your lips. And while your lips are still moving, you should not urinate at that time. By the way, I was just thinking about a question I had previously. If you remember, a couple of days ago, Rami Bar Abba was building a Beit Knesset, and he wanted to use some material from an old Beit Knesset to build a new one. And he was wondering, since Rav Chisda said you're not allowed to demolish an old Beit Knesset before the new one is built, he was wondering maybe that's because of the fear of negligence. You might demolish the old one, you'll never build a new one. But in this case, that I'm only demolishing the old one in order to build a new one, is it okay? So first he went to Rav Papa, who prohibited it, and then he went to Rav Huna, who prohibited it as well. And I asked, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to go to one rabbi and then to the other rabbi to see if the other rabbi is going to change his mind. So why would he go to a second rabbi? I was only wondering, if you remember the previous Gemara, Rami Bar Abba, Ravina had a mound of a Beit Knesset, which was a ruin, and he went to Rav Ashi and wanted to know if you're allowed to plant there. And he told him to go buy it from the 7 board members, which means that there's a solution. Right now it's prohibited, but there's a solution. So maybe Rami Bar Abba went to a second rabbi, not to find out if a second rabbi will allow something that the previous rabbi prohibited, but rather maybe there is a possible solution. The Gemara now brings a list of behaviors of various Tanoim who did extraordinary things, and because of that, they merited long life. I've always said the common denominator between all these things which merit long life is because somebody did more than you needed to do. He went the extra mile. In Brachot, we had a lot of cases where things that will give you extra life. Somebody who's ma'arich, somebody who takes his time in saying echad, somebody, Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, somebody who doesn't lose his temper and controls his temper when ordinarily he would have lost his temper. Cases where people do the extras, people go the extra mile. So here we go. Sholu Talmidav es Reb Zakkai, the Talmidim asked Reb Zakkai, B'meh herachta yomim, how was it that you lived long? Omer lehem, he said to them, Miyama, in all my days, lo hishtanti mayim, I never urinated, b'toch arba amos shel tefillah, within arba amot of where I prayed, even though we just finished saying that you're allowed to, but he went the extra mile, pardon the pun, he went the extra 4 amot. V'lo kiniti shem lechaverai, I never nicknamed my friend, even though it wasn't a derogatory nickname. It was just a nickname, but I never did that. V'lo bitalti kiddush hayom, and I never missed to make kiddush Friday night on wine. Ima zakena haisali, I had an old mother. Pam achat, one time, when I had no money to buy wine for kiddush, machra kippah shebarosha, she sold the kerchief that she wore on her head, and with the money, hevia li kiddush hayom. With the money, she brought me wine to make kiddush. Tana, we learned in a Braita, Kishemeta, when his mother died, when Reb Zakkai's mother died, Hinicha lo shlosh meot garbe yayin. She left him an inheritance of 300 barrels of wine. Kishemet hu, when he died, Hiniach levanav, he left for his children shloshet alafim garbe yayin, 3,000 barrels of wine. So as a reward for how much they cared about Kiddush, they were rewarded multiple times over. I used to have a kasha here. Who really sacrificed? The mother sacrificed. The mother sold a garment that she was wearing in order that her son should have Kiddush. So why was it that the son, when the mother died, she only left 300 barrels? When the son died, when Reb Zakkai died, he left 3,000. Wasn't the mother's sacrifice much greater than the son's? The son always made Kiddush, but the mother sold a garment of hers in order to produce the Kiddush. But I was thinking that the only reason she sold that kerchief on her head is because she saw how important making Kiddush Friday night on wine, how important that was to her son. It was he who really valued the opportunity to make that Kiddush D'Rabbanan al Yain Friday night that motivated her to sell the kerchief. So therefore, he was the impetus. He was he was the one who created that idea that it's so important. And therefore, she followed up on his strong feelings and sold her kerchief. And that too was a sacrifice. Therefore, she left 300 barrels. But he was the one who really felt the urgency of making Kiddush on wine. And therefore, he left 3,000. Rav Huna have a aser risa. Rav Huna tied himself around the waist with a branch of a plant V'koi kami de Rav, and Rav Huna was standing in front of his Rebbe, Rav. Amar lei, so Rav says, my hi, why don't you have a regular belt? Why are you tied with a branch? Amar lei, so Rav Huna says, Lehavali Kiddusha, I had no wine for Kiddush, umashkante lehem yonai. I went to a place and I borrowed money, and I gave him, I guess it was a valuable belt, I gave him my belt as security. And now that I had money, v'atoibe Kiddusha, and now I had money and I bought wine for Kiddush. But now I'm missing a belt, so I used this branch. Omer lei, so Rav told his Talmud Rav Huna, wow, you sacrifice so much to make Kiddush on wine, Yeherava de titum b'shiroi. It should be God's will, one day you should be covered in silks. Like, whereas now you're tied with a branch, one day may you be covered in elegant garments. Ki ikalal Rabba Brei, when Rav Huna's son Rabba got married, Rav Huna inish gutza, Rav Huna was a very short man, Havagana apuria, and Rav Huna lie down on a bed. Atyan benatei v'kalatei, Rav Huna's daughters and daughters-in-law came to the wedding. They didn't notice that their father and father-in-law was lying on a bed. Shalchan, they took off, v'shadyan, and threw manayhu, their silk cloaks, alay on him. They just dropped it off on the bed, not realizing that Pa is on the bed. Ad di'itum b'shiroi, until he was actually covered in silks. Shama Rav heard what happened to Rav Huna, the ikpid, he was upset with Rav Huna. Amar, he said, my Tama, what's the reason, lo amritli, that you didn't say to me, ki beirachtich, when I blessed you, that you should be covered in silks, you should have said, v'chein lamar, and same to you, sir, you should have blessed me back. I'm not sure, I think it's a Marsha that says, what was Rav so upset about? But he also wanted to lie in a bed and have a whole bunch of people use him as a cloakroom and throw their silk coats and jackets on him. He said, no, you see that it was an opportune moment. You see that blessings come true at the time that I blessed you. Unfortunately for you, the blessing that came true came in not such a terrific way. It didn't happen in a meaningful way. But maybe we would have said, V'chein lamar, you would have blessed me back. Maybe my merit would have allowed me to really become a wealthy man, that I would be able to afford many silk garments. Like sometimes, the blessing will come true, but the application of the blessing can vary. Some people, if for some reason they didn't merit, so they get covered in silks when everybody throws their jackets on them. Somebody else who merits more can merit to be covered in silks, to have valuable clothing. Shalu Talmida v'Sir Blazer ben Shamua, Talmida Master Blazer ben Shamua, b'meh rachta yamim. What gave you long life? Amr lem, he said, Miyamai lo osisi kapandria lebeit knesset. I never used the Beit Knesset as a shortcut. I never cut across. Like in school, I would never, just in order to get to the girls' lockers, I wouldn't go in through the door, which is nearer to the cafeteria, and cut across the Beit Knesset and go out the other door. It's not respectful. V'lo pasati al Roshei Am Kadosh. And when the Talmidim were sitting in Beit Midrash, I didn't step over their heads to get to my place. If you remember, before we had a Gemara where Rav came to Bavel on a fast day, and everybody did Tachanun, and Rav did not fall Tachanun. And one of the reasons why was because where Rav was standing, there was a stone floor, and Rav would not prostrate himself on the stone floor. Where the other people were standing was not a stone floor, and for Tachanun they did prostrate themselves. So the Gemara asked, so why didn't Rav go where the other people were, and he could have also prostrated himself? And the Gemara answered, he just didn't want to bother him. It's not respectful to push your way through a crowd to get to your place. V'lo nasasi kape below bracha, and I never did a birchot kohanim without making a bracha first. This is hard to understand a bit because that's not an extra. That's a halacha that you can't do birchot kohanim without making a bracha. But you should know there are many things that people do because you're supposed to do it. But some people do it with reluctance, and some people do it with care. And some people, they absolutely cherish the opportunity to do this. In other words, when Reb Loza ben Shamua made a bracha before he did Birchot Kahanim, you can tell that this was tremendously important to him. This is something that he would never, not That wouldn't happen to do Birchot Kahanim without a bracha, but he cherished the bracha before. I would never do Birchot Kahanim without making a bracha. I mean, I'll give you a classical example. People go up to the Torah and make a bracha before they have their aliyah. And some people do it by habit, and some people do it so, and some people do it with kavana, meaning, I would never, ever read from the Torah or have somebody read from the Torah for me without making a bracha first. They're cognizant of the importance of what they're doing. Just pointing out, I once saw an interesting point. We've talked many times about not being short-sighted. For instance, the Pavlov, when they would put food in a dog's bowl and ring a bell. And when they rang the bell, the dog came running and ate the food in his bowl. So eventually, whenever they rang the bell, the dog started salivating because he associated the ringing of the bell with food. Or vice versa. Let's say somebody is a very mean man and he has a stick and he hits the dog with it. So if the dog is a fool, whenever he sees the stick on the table, the dog shudders. Doesn't realize that it's not the stick, it's the man that's holding the stick who's mean and vicious. Very often people merit to live long, and you ask them why they lived long, and he'll explain to you, because I always ate a healthy food and I exercised regularly and I was careful to avoid stress and all the things that doctors say that help for longevity. Besides which, doctors say that genetics is the most important criteria for longevity. But then, after the genetics, you can maximize your longevity by living and behaving in a very careful manner. But that's all fine. But the question is, what motivated you? What motivated you to have those good habits? Why did you merit to have those good habits? You never know that because of the mitzvah that you did, because of your relationship with God, because you did things that were special to God, God then put you in a place or exposed you to people who motivated you to do healthy things, and therefore you lived long. Sometimes you have to be able to see not only the most immediate cause, but the underlying cause of why it came about that these good things happened to you. Sholo Tamidav Rabbi Preida, the Tamid Master Rabbi Preida, B'mei Rachta Yomim, how did you merit to live long? Amr Lam, he said, Miyamai, in my days, Lo Kedamani Adam Lebeis Medrash. Nobody came before me to the Beit Medrash. I was first. V'lo Birachti Lifnei Kohen. I never did Birkat HaMazon. I never led Birkat HaMazon if a Kohen was there. I always let the Kohen do it first. V'lo Achalti Mi Behema Shelo Hurmu Mat Noteha. I never ate meat from an animal. There's a mitzvah that when you slaughter a plain animal, not a korban, you have to give the zroa, the front right leg, the lechayayim, the cheeks, and the keva, one of the four stomachs, has to be given to a kohen.